FM 92.7, but we need to cross over now to the presidency because the government is publishing the findings of the committee that investigated the fatal August 6 helicopter crash, the accident that claimed 8 lives, including 2 cabinet ministers, Defense Minister Dr. Edward Omanebuama, Environment Minister Dr. Ibrahim Mutala Mohammed, and Acting National Security Coordinator Mohammed Limona. My name is Beatrice Adu. Let's cross over now to the presidency for the latest.
Flight 1 hour long. On the 3rd of August, the following day, they did a flight from Accra to Cape Coast back to Accra. 1 hour, 20 minutes. It was also a medical evacuation flight, Medivac. On the 4th, they were tasked to go fly Accra to Salman, back to Accra. That was a 2 hour 30 flight. That was a bullion flight, a cargo flight. On the 5th of August, they rested. Now, it helps to say here that in Ghana Air Force, there are flying limitations for the crew. You have 10 hours per week maximum, 62 hours maximum per month. Before flight, it's also accepted that if you've had a rest of 8 hours, you've had enough rest and you can go to work. They had in excess of 24 hours rest. On Wednesday, 6th August, the crew for the Z9 aircraft, call sign, IceCap, Hotel Romeo, India, planned to execute the task order for the Ministry of Defense. The flight was scheduled to depart at 8 a.m. with an estimated en route time of 50 minutes. The captain delayed the flight due to adverse weather in Accra, Kumasi, and Obuasi. The weather improved about an hour later, so takeoff ended up at 12 minutes, 14 seconds after 9 a.m. Throughout the flight, the altitude changed to avoid low clouds. Now let me explain why this was so. The flight started out being conducted under visual flight rules. Now, if you're flying under visual flight rules, what it means is you're using visual references to navigate. It's a normal way of flying. So they were using visual cues to navigate to go to Obuasi. And so they had to stay away from cloud, in contact with the ground. So as the cloud base changed, they changed their altitude. Where they needed to avoid, they would avoid. I'd like you to take a look at these 2 pictures. Now, first of all, these pictures were taken in the environs of where the accident took place. Take note, it wasn't taken on the day of the accident, but it's just representative. The picture on the left shows the morning weather and shows you the visibility, gives you some idea of the visibility on the day. The picture on the right is taken from the same place, looking at the same area, and you can clearly see that you can make out the ridges in the terrain over there. And it's noteworthy that on the day of the flight, this visibility you are seeing that I'm telling you, you can't even see that as you can see. On the day, the visibility was much worse. From eyewitness accounts, the visibility was down to close to 200 meters at some point. This also shows a picture of actual weather from a passenger who was on board the aircraft, just to give you an idea. The weather in the southern Ghana was poor on the day, which delayed departure for about an hour. In Accra, conditions were misty, with visibility of about 5 to 7 kilometers in very low clouds, starting at only 700 to 1,100 feet above the ground. While the situation improved slightly later in the morning, the early hours were dominated by haze and overcast skies. In Kumasi, the weather was worse, with drizzle reducing visibility to around 4 kilometers and heavy low clouds sitting just 600 to 900 feet above the ground. Only Accra and Kumasi Aerodrome were available. Only Accra and Kumasi Aerodrome weather were available. There was no formal information on the weather available to the pilots along the flight route. Witnesses reported poor visibility due to fog and rain at Beatrice and its environs. Environmental commissions in the Dampier Forest Reserve and its rugged terrain of hills, mountains, created conditions such that over such rugged terrain, you can have turbulence, downdraft, and other phenomena. Now, to look at this is what we're talking about. This is a known aviation phenomena when you have such rugged territory. And what ends up happening is turbulent wind currents occur usually around ridgelines, mountains, and hills, and can generate sink rates in excess of 1,000 feet a minute in moderate wind conditions. These sink conditions can often exist well above the barrier that induces the eddies. We assessed the aircraft to see if it was fit for purpose. The helicopter entered the Ghana Air Force Service in May 2015, having been manufactured in 2012, and it reached its 10-year service threshold on 18th May 2025. Aircrafts have periodic checks to make sure that they're fit for service. The Air Force has 25-hour checks, 50-hour checks, and 100-hour checks. The 10-year check for the helicopter is what was mandated for this helicopter. Now, as is usual, an operator, in this case Ghana Air Force, requested from the manufacturer an extension. And it's normal, happens in civil flying, happens with any type of flying. The manufacturer gave a 90-day extension to 18th August 2025. And basically, the helicopter met all the basic safety requirements. That notwithstanding, it sort of met a 100-hour check. So the Air Force also did a 100-hour check on the helicopter before the flight. The aircraft on the day was declared serviceable and duly signed off by both the engineers and the captain. The flight data report indicates that the helicopter was in good working condition. The helicopter, however, did not have some avionic safety enhancements. As I said before, the aircraft was serviceable and airworthy. The additional safety equipment that the helicopter did not have were things like the helicopter terrain awareness system or the enhanced ground proximity warning system, as you may choose, advanced navigation with terrain mapping, an automatic flight control system. And I would say that these safety equipment would have enhanced situational awareness. For instance, it didn't have an autopilot. That's advanced, the automatic flight control system, so that the crew had to manually fly the plane. So it sort of increases workload. Typically, you want to have a plane that has an autopilot. All the civil planes use autopilots, and the workload on the pilots is very low. It gives you the chance to do things and to think easily, and so on and so forth. Despite all this, the aircraft was in a good condition to fly and met all safety requirements. The investigation has recommended strongly for aircraft with these additional safety enhancements to be acquired immediately for the Air Force. To rule out any potential human causes, we also examined the qualifications, experience, and competence of the crew. The captain has a postgraduate certificate in safety and accident investigation from Cranfield University, UK, in 2024. The captain was a qualified FAA, that's the Federal Aviation Administration, commercial and instrument-rated pilot from Bristol Academy, Florida, USA, in April 2015, 10 years ago. Within the Ghana Air Force, he was recategorized in March 2025 as a Cat C pilot. That is, a pilot qualified to be a captain on the helicopter, the Z9 helicopter. And he had a green instrument rating. In the Air Force, they have gradings for pilots, categories for pilots from A to D. D being, depends on what you call high and low, D being for the initial, sort of, and then you go all the way to A. It's interesting to note that for quite a while, and as at now in the Air Force, the highest category is Cat C. So the pilot was totally competent to be flying this plane. The co-pilot was also a qualified FAA commercial and instrument-rated pilot from Bristol Academy, Florida, and he qualified in April 2023. In December 2024, he was recategorized within the Ghana Air Force as a Category D pilot on helicopter type with a white instrument rating. To further rule out any potential human causes, we examined the medical and psychological records of the crew. A review of the medical and personal records revealed no known medical or psychological conditions in the captain, co-pilot, or technician at the time of flight. All three were described by witnesses as calm, prepared, and professional during the pre-flight activities. Fatigue or medication was not considered to have materially affected their performance on the day of flight. Now to the sequence of events. The flight departed Accra under visual flight rules in marginal weather. The flight to Brofuyedru was uneventful. Brofuyedru is approximately 90 miles from Accra, about 10 miles from Obuasi. As the flight approached Obuasi, visibility deteriorated rapidly due to mist and low clouds. At 9:56, the crew entered IMC, which is Instrument Meteorological Conditions. To the layman, it is they flew into clouds because they no longer could stay away from the clouds, so they flew into clouds and transitioned to IFR. Now, IFR is Instrument Flight Rules. So what it means is they now transitioned from navigating using visual cues to now navigation solely on the aircraft's instruments. The crew then initiated a climb to cross terrain that they were aware of. They initiated the climb to cross the terrain. Seconds before impact, the crew stated that they could see the high ground below, so they'd gone over it. Suddenly thereafter, the helicopter that was flying up without any change in its power or in the pitch which we use to go up and down, suddenly lost height and impacted a ridgeline at about 1370 feet above sea level. And this was about 6.5 miles from the destination, and this happened at 9:58. Said all that. Good. Now, the dotted blue line is what the planned track had been. The purple line is what the aircraft actually flew. And that took place because it was avoiding clouds and so on and ended up where it was. Now to our findings. The helicopter was airworthy, but it lacked additional safety enhancements. For instance, the terrain awareness warning system. Now, you know, the terrain awareness warning system, for instance, is predictive. So what it does is it tells you, warns you, it gives you a better picture of the situation and puts the pilots in a better, it gives them, puts them in a position to make better judgments, to be able to see everything and be able to foretell if there are any things that could possibly create a problem. But they lack the additional safety enhancements required for the weather phenomenon over that terrain. There was adverse weather, there was limited visibility, there was rising rugged terrain, where this terrain induced complicating factors, and there were no ground-based navigational route aids en route. The investigation would like to say that from everything they gathered, the emergency response was very timely. The fact that these first responders managed to get to the site in about 2 hours was remarkable because the terrain has very steep slopes. It was raining, it was slippery. So it wasn't the easiest thing to do. When we went to the site, it was also raining and it was very slippery. And we struggled using sticks and everything to try to get up there. So looking at everything, we would say very confidently that the emergency response was very timely. The investigation determined that the accident was caused by the sudden loss of altitude and lift due to downdraft. This loss of altitude without change in power or pitch altitude is consistent with downdraft associated with changing environmental conditions over high terrain. In our findings also, we said there's limited national navigational capacity, a capability for en route and remote area weather services. We also looked at training and realized that the Air Force doesn't have much simulator training. We looked at flight monitoring and realized that there was no flight data monitoring also taking place. For flight following and tracking of aircrafts, we realized that it was also not there. There's no secondary surveillance radar, no automatic dependent surveillance broadcasts, or any other real-time tracking of aircraft. Our safety recommendations. there is a definite need to modernize the fleet of the Ghana Air Force. We have recommended that the Air Force acquire modern aircraft with terrain avoidance warning systems and modern navigation systems. That the aircraft should have cockpit voice recorders and flight data recorders, which are the audiovisual capable types. That the Air Force should invest in simulators for recurrent training. That they contract certified aviation weather provider or providers, and that Ghana as a nation should try to have en route navigational aids, especially in remote areas. The Air Force should seriously consider establishing flight data monitoring and en route tracking systems. And finally, we believe that they need to acquire ground support equipment, modernize what they have. In conclusion, the helicopter accident was an unfortunate and sudden weather-related accident. Implementing the safety recommendations will prevent the reoccurrence of future accidents. At this time, before I take any questions, I just want to give a few acknowledgements. I'd like to acknowledge the efforts and the support that the team had from the National Security Secretariat, led by the National Security Coordinator. It made what was a really difficult job for us much easier to do and encouraged us to do and persevere to come up with these results. I'd like to say thank you also to the US team that joined us for a period of the investigation, the Chinese for their warm welcome of us when we went to China for the decoding and all the assistance that they gave us. They were very professional and they worked with us and got us everything that we needed to be able to fully understand what happened. I'd also like to acknowledge the lead investigator, who in truth is not here today, Air Commodore Akron. He is on national duty outside, but he was a lead investigator and he worked really hard. I'd also like to acknowledge my mother organization, which is the Aircraft Accident and Incident Investigation Bureau, and its commissioner, Mr. John Wombati, for all the support he gave to us and the full availability of the AIB architecture to help us. And to the team that did this investigation, for their open-mindedness, their objectivity, their logic, their diligence and perseverance, and their dedication and commitment for over 2 months, working close to 7 days every day, sometimes from morning 9 till 9 at night, because we knew the country was hungry to know what had happened. And finally, I'd like to thank God for blessing us and giving us the fortitude, the mindset, and for guiding us to come up with this report, which we hope will bring closure to the families of our departed heroes and to the nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Fojo, for that comprehensive and detailed report. Well, at this stage, I would invite questions from members of the media present so that any clarifications that are required are made before we leave. If you have a question, please take the microphone, identify yourself, the organization you work for, and ask it so that answers may be provided.
Good afternoon. My name is Maxwell Agbaba. I work with Joy FM and Enjoy News. I know a lot of Ghanaians will be curious to know if the investigative committee listened to the audio recordings, of the helicopter. And I want to find out if indeed you listened, if it's possible to give us an idea of what happened in that moment. And then the second question, you talked about modernizing the fleet of the Ghana Armed Forces. I know right after the incident, there were calls to modernize the fleet, and this revelation is definitely going to reignite the calls, especially also coming on the back of recent discoveries about the presidential jet. I know there are investments, there are plans to inject $1 billion to retool the security agencies. As an expert, I want to find out how fast should we do this and which areas should we look at? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, please? Yeah, courage. Yeah.
Komla Kulisha, I work at Media General. What was the sudden cause of the loss of altitude for the aircraft, and also the fact that there was postponement in the airworthiness of the helicopter? One, was there an understanding why the Ghana Air Force postponed the initial maintenance of the Z9, and what was the reason behind this?
Thank you very much. Any other questions, please? Okay, so Captain Fojo would answer these, after which we'll come back for another round of questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions. Yes, we listened to the CVR. We listened to it several times. And it is part of what informed us of what caused the accident. And for modernization of the fleet, we think it should be done immediately. Tomorrow is not fast enough. As soon as the country can afford and do it, we should do it, because it would help the Air Force with this core mandate, part of which is to fly dignitaries all over the country. And I think we owe it to ourselves as a nation to make sure that we have aircraft fit for purpose, aircraft that are of the highest technology, to make sure that everything is very, very safe. Yeah. To the sudden loss of altitude, I'm sure it was in one of the slides. When you're over rugged territory, that's over terrain, dependent on the steepness and so on and so forth, it's very easy to have turbulence. It's caused by eddies and rotors. It's an aviation phenomena, right? And you have updrafts, you have downdrafts. And even interestingly, even above the ridge, you can still have downdrafts coming. And it's a phenomena, it's an aviation phenomena that unfortunately they fell into. They were very unfortunate, but it's a phenomenon that they fell into. And because there cannot be any other reason for that sudden loss of altitude for a plane climbing with power, with a pitch attitude, right? Because you see, the flight data recorder, to just help you understand the whole thing, the flight data recorder records the last 10 hours of a flight. The cockpit voice recorder records the last 2 hours of a flight. The flight data recorder, this particular one on this helicopter, records 93 parameters every second. The 93 parameters is made up of 48 analog parameters and 45 switch positions. So, looking at the flight data report, you know where all the switch positions are, you know what the height of the plane was, you know the exact position you know it time bound. So what we are saying is from informed data. It's not that we've just conjectured something. We have the data, we've looked at it, and that is how come we've come with the conclusions we've come up with. I hope I've answered. Then the last one, the postponement of the maintenance. It's industrial practice. It's operational. In the airlines, it's done. Air Force doing it, there's nothing wrong with it. It's accepted practice. So there's nothing to it. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are any more questions, I'll take them now. Yeah.
My name is Abdul Hanan Adam. I work with the EIB network. Minister, I'd like to find out from the experts if there was any possibility for an emergency landing, and was there an avenue for them or the crew to consider that? Thank you.
Was there what? Please
an avenue.
Avenue, okay.
For the crew to
As in, was there a place nearby where they
exactly
could land? Okay.
For an emergency landing?
All right.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
My name is Julius. I report for the Ghanaian Times. Sir, in your presentation, you mentioned that the helicopter was in a very good shape, but then they did not have what you called avionics safety requirements, additional avionics safety requirement. If they had, would it have assisted them to avoid this? And then outside of your report, there have been a lot of speculations about the final moments of the aircraft from eyewitnesses that it exploded, parts scattered all over the place. Could you address this for us, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can come back here.
So I'm back again. If my memory could serve me right, I think the release by the Ghana Armed Forces just shortly after the announcement was made in this hall by the Chief of Staff did indicate that the heli went off the radar. But from the presentation, we are made to understand that there was no monitoring. I stand to be corrected though. How do we marry these two?
All right. Thank you very much. Is there another question, please? Okay, so Captain Fojo would take these questions here.
Thank you once again for your questions. I would like to presume that when you say emergency landing, you mean a diversion, because an emergency landing is when something goes wrong with the plane, because nothing ever went wrong with the plane. The decision to continue or to do an intermediate landing is the discretion of the captain. The captain was confident that he didn't need to do it. That is why he didn't do it. In terms of the additional avionics, right? I believe the question was, if they had it, would it have prevented the accident? Was that the question? Okay. All I would say is it could have prevented the accident, because it would have put the pilots in a better situational awareness mode. And it would have put them in a much better place to have taken decisions which could possibly have avoided this. But let's not kid ourselves. Let me just say something. What they went through is the sort of thing that even the best anywhere would have struggled to get out of, using what they were, with the limited instrumentation and so on that they had. The instrumentation, the instrumentation was fit for everything, but what we are saying is, I guess it's like saying that more meat never spoils the soup. It's, if you have all these other enhancements, it really helps. The Air Force the Air Force would be happy to have these enhancements because they know what it would help them do, and it would make our dignitaries and so on much safer when they fly. So that is why we are recommending that. But it doesn't mean that the fact that those enhancements were not there, that is why the accident happened. No, it would be wrong to say so. That would be too far-fetched. In terms of the explosion, there was no explosion before. You know, the Z9 helicopter, its fuel tank actually is under the where the passengers sit, right? So when it impacted, and don't forget, it was doing a flight to Obuasi and back. It wasn't going to refuel in Obuasi. So it had fueled up well. So on impact, that is when the explosion took place. We looked at all that. We looked at the corroboration. The time when, because you see, when there was the impact, when the explosion took place, don't forget, there were eyewitness accounts. So the eyewitness accounts tally with what we're saying. In terms of the helicopter going off radar, our radar systems in the country are just Accra, Kumasi. The route they were flying, together with the height at which they were flying, it was very easy for them to go off radar. It's normal. Flight monitoring, which is what we're talking about, is different from being on a radar, right? Flight monitoring is knowing where your aircraft is at any time. It doesn't have to be on a radar screen. It can be through messages. That's why we said things like secondary surveillance, radar broadcasts, and so on and so forth, right? But it's a tracking system, okay, and it should be done for all Air Force aircraft. In fact, in the civil world, airlines, by law, have to track the aircraft. So what we're asking for is we're not asking for the moon. It's something that must be done. I hope I've answered your questions. Thank you.
So if there are any final questions, we will take them. Otherwise, we call it a day. All right. So thank you very much for coming. And thanks to Captain Fojo and his team for delivering a comprehensive report, which, for all intents and purposes, should put to rest any doubts about the events of that fateful day. Thanks all. Thanks to you all for coming here. All right.
Gets busy on this frequency. 92.7 3 FM.
Hello, Ghana. It's a new year and Bill's Microcredit is here to support your dreams. If you're not working but want to start a business, don't let money stop you. With just your Ghana card, you can get a loan to turn your ideas into reality. Already running a business? Need more capital? Or are you a salary worker looking for extra funds? Bill's offers fast and easy loans with no collateral, no deposit,